How'd you do? Well, let's see. So again, many of you probably hit some roadblocks along here, and you're going to learn from it now as we go over it. So don't sweat it. Okay, lots of chances to practice. Keep practicing. We'll have the live lesson to work on it, and you will get there. So let's take a look first at what we're given. We're given the 61-degree angle, so that's going to be our angle. We're given one of the legs, and we're given an unknown side here. So let's take a look at what we've got. So this length of 9 here, that side, you look at it, you say, is this adjacent or opposite of the 61 degree? It is adjacent, right? It's one of the rays that forms. The hypotenuse and this leg form the 61-degree angle, so this is adjacent. And then x here, our unknown, is the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is always opposite of the right angle. So that's our hypotenuse. So actually, we're in a similar situation to what we had with number 4 in the fact that we've got adjacent and hypotenuse, which is again going to lead us to the cosine function. The difference is that what we were given and what we want are switched, right? So we're going to have here a similar equation. So cosine of 61 degrees equals now adjacent over hypotenuse, so 9 over x. Okay, so last time it was x over 8, now it's 9 over x. So what we're going to do, let's just cross multiply again. Stick with what we're used to here. X times cosine of 61 equals 9 times 1. Okay, now we need to get x by itself. So we're going to divide both sides by the same thing. So which is the cosine of 61. Now if you want to, you can figure out what the cosine of 61 is before you divide it, or you can just write it like this, either way. So we end up here with x equals 9 over cosine of 61. Okay, so you can do this either way. Okay, use your calculator right from the get-go, or you can find the cosine of 61 and then divide that into 9. Either way you want to do it, okay? Make sure if you do it all in one fell swoop that you know how to use parentheses correctly, or you might end up with the wrong answer. So we've got 9 divided by, in parentheses, 61, the cosine of that, close parentheses, hit equals, and I get 18.56. Okay, rounded to the nearest tenth, that's going to be 18.6. So our hypotenuse here is 18.6. Okay, so always make sure things make sense too. You make a mistake and you get a number smaller than 9, or you get something that's just ridiculously larger, like 2,842 or something. You know, make sure that things make sense too. You know, the sides have to make sense. Remember, the hypotenuse is always the longest, but it's got to be a realistic longest as well. All right, so let's take a look now at finding angle measures given sides using trig ratios. Let's look at using an inverse. Okay, if you remember back to Algebra 1, an inverse is where you switch the inputs and the outputs. So here, instead of taking an angle and finding a side as a result, now we're going to take sides and we're going to use them to find an angle. So you can see here in problem 3 that both A and B, we're not given any angle measures. We're asked to find the measure of angle T. So angle T is right here. Okay, so we're still going to use trig ratios. We're just going to be using the inverse of those trig functions. So if we take a look here, we still want to figure out which ratio we want to use. We've got the 7 and the 13 here. Well, how do they relate? The 7 is opposite of that angle T, and the 13, well, that's the hypotenuse. The right angle, right there. Hypotenuse. So which trig ratio are we going to use here? So you take a look down there, which one's got opposite, which one's got hypotenuse? Well, that's sine. All right, so sine, we go up here and we say the sine of angle T is going to be equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse, so 7 over 13. So right now, that doesn't seem to help us because we can't plug angle T into our calculator. But what we can do is we can use the inverse function. Remember, inverses switch the input and the output. Okay, so before we were inputting angle T and getting an unknown side. Now we're going to be inputting sides and getting angle T. So the way we denote an inverse is by this little exponent, little -1 here. Okay, that's just symbol for inverse. And now we switched. We put the 7/13 in here. And angle T out here. Okay, and that's what we're looking for. So now what you're going to do in your calculator, okay, is you have to switch over to the inverse function. And what you're going to do is you're going to use this key right here on the Microsoft calculator. That's like the shift key. And your calculator home may have different buttons. There might be a shift button or whatnot. But when you hit that, you're going to see that the sign button turns into that sign with the little -1. So what you're going to do now is we're going to take 7/13. So I'm going to do that first. So clear. So 7 divided by 13. And then I hit the equal sign. And I get 0.53, yada, yada, yada. Now I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to hit that arrow key. And then I see it's sign -1. So I hit the sign -1 button. And I get 32.578, yada, yada, yada. It says here to round to the nearest degree. So that is 33 degrees. So angle T equals 33 degrees. Okay, so go ahead and punch that into the calculator. Don't just watch it. Punch it into your calculator and make sure you can do this. Sometimes people do everything right and then they just struggle with the calculator at the end. So don't let that happen to you. Now let's look at B. Okay, so B, think about what ratio you want to use and get that set up. So B is going to have angle T again. So we've got our adjacent side. We've got our hypotenuse. What are we going to be looking at? Cosine, right? So cosine, -1. Okay, it's going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. So 8/10. And that's going to equal the measure of angle T. Right now, all I want you to do for the last problem of the day here is to plug that into the calculator. All right, good luck. And there'll be one last video going over this.